position. Guys, this is a very important Facebook Live because normalizing things isn't good. We've been normalizing injuries. Last week we talked about normalizing teen behaviors, and it was the best feedback that I've gotten from a Facebook Live ever, personally, because we talked about some deep stuff and how, as youth influencers, it's our fault for normalizing the behaviors and actions of a lot of our youth today, normalizing them, because we get what we expect, nothing more, nothing less. But this week it's more about injuries and how in athletics we have normalized the fact that kids all over are injured all the time. Injuries that are an all-time high. I mean, 10x what they were even 10 years ago. Injuries are just all over the place. And you may be sitting here thinking to yourself, yeah, I guess my kid has aches and pains, their ankles hurt, their shoulders hurt all the time. Not normal as far as I'm concerned, and it doesn't have to be that way either.
No, and ultimately it's a major culprit of burnout. I mean, if you're constantly in pain, I mean, look at Andrew Luck. Andrew Luck turned down big bucks because he was constantly revolving around this injury cycle, battling from PT to the field to rehab to all that different stuff. So if your kid is in chronic pain, chances are their longevity of their sports career is going to shorten. So it's something we definitely need to touch on if we want to save the state of youth athletics.
So we had a young lady start working out with us quite a few years ago, but it was in high school that she was a soccer player. She started to experience shin splints. Shin splints are from a chronic overuse of the lower leg. A lot of soccer players, lacrosse players, they start to get shin splints because they're cutting all the time on turf. A lot of people are on turf nowadays. They're cutting all the time, they're running all the time. Constant wear and tear on the calf muscles lead to pain and over time, overuse, which is shin splints. Her shin splints, over time, started to turn into something more serious called compartment syndrome. Now that compartment syndrome, when that happens, we're not going to go into science today, but it makes running impossible. Your legs go numb when you run. You can't do it. It's impossible. So her shin splints turned into compartment syndrome, and this poor young girl got to the Division I level to play soccer, and she couldn't play her freshman year. How crushed would you be if you've been working your entire career? Think about it. I mean, the reason why most kids are playing year-round and going over and over, playing over and over again, is because they want to play at the next level. And isn't it odd how you get to the next level and this girl, because of her injury, couldn't actually play? And so she went through her freshman year, injured, she couldn't step onto the field, and then finally, after fall season, after the fall soccer season was over, she wanted to play in spring season, and her coaches had written her off. Her coaches didn't play her because, well, she was injured all fall, she probably isn't prepared to play, she's probably not going to be able to make a difference. So they wrote her off, like some coaches do, unfortunately. And because this girl, who was a freak athlete, I mean, one of the best athletes ever, because she was injured, she couldn't play, and she lost her entire freshman year, and now she's having to make a decision, do I continue to play sports or not? And I think the saddest part about it all is it could have all been prevented, and she could have enhanced her performance had she have understood the concept that more is not better, less is often more when it comes to playing sports. I've always told athletes, I mean, you could be the best athlete in the world, but if you're injured, you better find out how to be a very motivating water boy, which that's an important role as well. That's a different article, different topic. But that's the deal. I mean, if you're injured, you're not much good to your team. So it doesn't matter how athletic you got or how much stamina you have. So what are your thoughts, Bewley?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, you come to a training facility, the first thing people think of is I want to enhance my athletic capabilities. And I get that, right? But like Andrew said, if you're not on the field playing, it doesn't matter how fast, how strong, any of those things don't do anything if you're not healthy to play. So the one thing that a lot of athletes face is they kind of take this old school approach that more is better, right? And they get away with it early on. I mean, when you're young, you typically bounce back.
I'll tell you that all the time.
You do tell me that all the time, but hey, power of the positive mindset. I'm not allowed to hit me. And over time, I mean, what worked when they were in 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th grade, eventually as they hit 11th, 12th to college, it catches up to them. And that wear and tear, that cumulative wear and tear, overstressing the body and not recovering enough, it takes its toll. And unfortunately, it happens a lot of times at that 11th, 12th, freshman year of college area, where you see these kids that have been chronically overworked really start falling back, and they don't understand why, but really it's just because they've done things the same way over and over and over, and their bodies just can't handle the stress.
So for the Center for Disease Control, the CDC, brings out statistics every year about injuries in sports, and they do all sorts of other stuff too, but for us, we look at the injury statistics. They reported that over half of all sports-related injuries were from non-contact injuries or things that were preventable. Over half of all the injuries that happen were preventable. And so that leads me to, for one, obviously think about solutions, but even before that, I think about what is the root cause of injuries. It's not overuse. The root cause of injuries is our mindset and why we can't seem to put the dots together and connect the dots that too much playing over time is going to lead to injuries. I think one of the reasons is because of obliviousness, truthfully. I think there are a lot of coaches and parents who are oblivious to the fact that their kids are actually playing too much. And performance decreases over time. I mean, you get slower in games if you're dinged up. Imagine playing at 80%. Imagine having 80% of your speed. You could run 10 miles per hour, now you can only run 8. You were elite, now you're average. That's literally the connection between an athlete that is playing at 80 or 90% all the time, and that leads to a more serious injury like an ACL or like a rotator cuff or something like that. Those are just overuse injuries that have perpetuated themselves all the way to a chronic 12-month injury.
Yeah, and I mean, at the end of the day, we're over-specializing in skill development and not enough on the physical strength side. And a lot of times, just general strength training is going to be one of the best injury preventions that you can have, but we're playing so much that we're not really able to have that time to really dive in and focus on that, filling that bucket that we need to hit. Again, we're just specializing in the skill too much, and we're missing that bucket altogether.
Okay, so what about the fear of falling behind? I personally think that's a root cause of why kids aren't taking breaks from sports.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, it does work for some athletes. Some athletes do play year-round, and they get to where they want to go, so that people start to think that's the only route, right? And they're comparing their work regimen to that athlete's work regimen. But everybody's built a little bit different, right? And if you're following that same workout regimen or that same training regimen, it might not work for you, right? And you're afraid that you're going to fall behind your friends that are playing year-round. But if you're playing at 80%, 70%, 60%, because now you're banged up, really, what's the positive there, right? You're playing slower as a result of trying to keep up.
So what are some of the red flags that parents should look out for, or coaches should look out for, to show that their kid is either on the path to burnout, mentally, physically, or on the path to injury? What are some of the signs and symptoms of a kid who is maybe on the road to having a more chronic injury?
You can definitely tell movement patterns, right? Are they starting to slow down? Are they starting to complain a little bit? Or do they look like they're lagging behind, right? You typically can see body language when a kid's going into practice. And if they're playing banged up, you're definitely going to see a decreased performance. And then that kid who's unable to perform at a higher level, when he gets into competition mode, he's going to overexert himself or herself.
So, I mean, one of the simple ones is your kid not that excited to go to practice?
Yeah.
Right? Or are they just constantly saying, ow, my ankle, ow, my knee? Right? That's another great sign that they're on their way to possibly a chronic injury. And it's hard, too, because you have to do some digging with kids nowadays because none of them actually admit when they're hurt.
Yeah.
They don't like, a lot of them don't like it. There's no balance. It's like one end of the spectrum is complaining all the time just to get out of things. Probably not your kid, maybe not your kid. And then the other end is, I don't want to tell anyone that I'm injured for fear of not being on the field, because if I'm not on the field, I don't get praised and recognized, I don't get in the paper, I don't get the scholarship. It's the path to doom, right? They think that if they are injured, that equates to, I'm not going to get playing time, coach is going to write me off like he did that collegiate athlete. So there's a whole broken system, I think, that coaches, parents, and athletes need to work on for better communication. Otherwise, I mean, the path is going to continue. The law of the path states that whatever path you're on, it leads to a destination. We got to get off this path of everything we're doing wrong with injuries, which there will be an article going out tomorrow. If you're not on our email list, go to pfpfit.com, get on our email list so you get this article because it explains this whole concept in full.
Yeah. But I mean, on that one, even the kid that's complaining all the time to get out of things, there's a reason they're doing that. And when I first started in this field, that really frustrated me. I'm like, come on, you have this opportunity, let's seize it. But they're doing it for some reason. And they might be in a little bit of pain, or they might be having excess stress mentally with sports that they need to work through to go back to enjoying sports, right? And both ends of the spectrum do have their flaws, but understand you can't just ridicule and judge the kid that's making the excuses because they don't want to do something, because there's something that's causing that. And once you can connect with that athlete and find what's making that athlete tick and why that's happening, then you can address it, and you might be able to pull more out of them that way. So both sides definitely do have their flaws that inevitably will lead to burnout at some capacity.
Okay, I've got 2 quick stories, then I'm going to be done for the day, but I want to share these with you because they could impact your son or daughter big time. We had another athlete, another female. She was a lacrosse player. She made it to the Division I level to play lacrosse. She battled chronic overuse injuries all throughout middle and high school. Crazy, because it led to the same exact thing in the story I explained before, compartment syndrome, but this one eventually lent itself to something called popliteal entrapment syndrome, which more or less is a condition where your legs lose blood flow, your legs go numb, you can't feel them, over time could lead to amputation. Sounds like a no-brainer to me. Stop playing sports, right? Not easy mentally, right? Easy decision physically, not easy mentally. This girl lost a little bit of identity in this process, which makes sense. And because of playing over and over again, and I'm not saying she could have prevented it necessarily, but she might have been able to, right? If this kind of information was out a little bit more 8-9 years ago, if she would have had strategic pauses throughout her year, so let's say every 12 weeks she took a week off, right? Every month she took a weekend of recovery. Every 6 weeks she did a massage. Like, there's just ways that we can go about doing this better to help our athletes, to serve them. And truthfully, for us in here, it might mean shutting them down from all running and jumping for a while. I think that we have to stop doing what we think is best for us, and we have to start always considering what is the best, in the best interest of the kid long term, because this girl, long term, could have lost her leg. Like, some of our kids are going through injuries right now that are literally going to have effect on them when they're 70 years old. That's not cool. Yeah. Like, when we have our physical health, we have 1,000 dreams. When we lose our physical health, we have one dream, right? To be healthy again. So we have to stop long enough to think, what are the long-term repercussions of the way I'm training my kids, what I'm doing in practice, and the year-round playing of the same sport, it's got to stop. Like, you need breaks. All right, last story. I did have one more. This young girl that works out with us, she's a softball player. She gave me permission to share this story. She took 2 weeks off last week. She came back into the gym 3 days ago, and she had taken 2 weeks off of playing softball completely, which, taking a break, by the way, it doesn't mean scaling back a little bit. It means, like, stopping. You know what I mean? Like, just foam roll, stretch, get your mind right, recover, listen to music, have fun. Don't play your sport. It's a deload, mentally and physically. And she came back in and her mom told me this, but then she confirmed it so I could put it into this story. She said, Andrew, I came back from this 2 weeks off, and not only was I actually excited, like I couldn't wait to get back onto the softball field, but I hit the ball so hard that it broke the net. I guess she was doing batting practice and hit it. She said, I broke the net. So let's see here. Take time off, become more powerful. Take time off, become more clear and more excited. Guys, it's a win-win.
It's a no-brainer.
It's a no-brainer, and we got to position ourselves as coaches and organizations to be able to lean into that and not fear, what's this going to do to my bottom line if these kids don't train for a month? How's this going to affect our income, our numbers? Things are changing. Parents are becoming more educated. Athletes are becoming smarter. They don't want to have injuries when they're 60. They're starting to think a little bit further in advance. And we personally in here, we believe that if we do the right thing for them today, that could impact them later. Even if it doesn't impact us in a positive way right now, doesn't matter. It'll come back. It's the law of reaping and sowing. You reap what you sow.
Yeah.
So as coaches, I think we could do a better job of sowing seeds of long-term health and longevity.
Yeah, and I got one more thing. I'm going through a podcast right now by Todd Durkin, and he interviews Drew Brees. And at the end of Drew Brees' football season, he puts down the ball, he doesn't touch the weights, and he goes and he enjoys his life with his family, okay? And I know the athletes now, they don't have their family like Drew Brees does, but they have other areas that they should be filling up, and they should take a break to kind of get the mental clarity and let their bodies physically rest a little bit. So if you want to model someone, Drew Brees, he's a record-holding quarterback for the NFL. He'll go down in the Pro Bowl. I can attach the podcast, let you guys give it a listen. It's 50 minutes. It dives into his physical regimen and his mental clarity, how he gains that. It's a really good listen if you want a little bit more on how he kind of handles that year-long stresses of being an NFL quarterback, which I feel like, unfortunately, we're putting unneeded stress like that on a lot of our athletes these days.
Yep, it's a good podcast to check out. Hey, your athlete can have their cake and eat it too. I mean, they can perform at a high level and stay injury-free and have good relationships and do well in school and be happy. Like, it can all happen. It just takes a lot of intention and change with the new generation. So if you guys want to hear more, check back in next Tuesday. We're going to be talking more about this idea of normalizing things in youth athletics and normalizing things in youth in general. We'll see you guys then.
Peace.